welcome to the 18th episode of the Daily Geeky Pastimes Podcast, where we talk about gaming news, we talk about controversial issues within gaming, and you get a chance to have some input. So if you want to be there for when we record this live, it's at 9 a.m. UK time every weekday at Geeky Pastimes on YouTube, so youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes. And then if you want to listen to the audio version, you can listen to it on all your normal podcast services. Thanks so much for everyone who has supported the channel, all of the members, people who have joined up. It's only $1.99 a month to join, and it keeps me doing this and providing these podcasts. So please consider becoming a member if you can. So what we're going to be talking about today, we've got a few different news stories talking about Plunder coming back to Warzone a bit earlier than we expected. We're going to be talking about Horizon Forbidden West's DLC getting review bombed on Metacritic. We're going to talk about the PlayStation boss saying that he cancels so many games. And we're going to talk about Microsoft saying that Xbox revenue is down, and maybe a little bit about why that might be. But the big topic we're going to be talking about today, and please, people in chat, let me know your thoughts, and we'll come back to them when we get to that topic, is what's going to be the next big thing in gaming? I think like Battle Royales for a while were kind of the big thing, especially with Fortnite. Like Fortnite was obviously massive, and Warzone kind of changed Call of Duty fairly dramatically. But we're starting to move on from that, and it's kind of interesting seeing the almost squabbling about what's going to be the next big thing. So we'll talk about what we think that'll be a little bit later. But first, let's talk about the news. So Plunder returning to Warzone. This was, at least to me, a surprise announcement last night. The Call of Duty Twitter channels put out a trailer for Plunder, and we're just like, yep, Plunder's coming out tomorrow. So today, when I'm recording this. That really surprised me. Like, that really kind of... I assumed that Plunder was going to be one of the things for Season 3 Reloaded. And it does kind of make me think maybe we're getting a lot more with Season 3 Reloaded than we originally thought. Like, we know we're going to be getting another raid. We know we're getting some Spec Ops missions. We know, I think, we're getting another multiplayer map. We're getting Warzone Ranked is the big thing. I suppose that's quite enough already, but I thought Plunder was going to be a part of that. But for whatever reason, they're releasing it today. We don't know what time yet. I have seen people guessing that it could be like lunchtime UK time if they do one of those really early releases in the US. Or I think more likely is probably going to be like 6 o'clock UK time, so when they normally do the updates on a Wednesday. And people have noted that the free trial of Call of Duty ends around then. So it's kind of, this could be the next thing that they're trying to get people engaged with. So yeah, we will have Plunder later. I will be streaming some Plunder. I'll be over on twitch.tv/Geeky Pastimes playing some Plunder. Flynn's definitely in. We might have Scotto, we might have Fireborn, we'll have a group of people just to try out the mode, just to see what it's all about. They've said that there's some new changes to it. They've said that I think there's going to be some new events within it. I'm kind of intrigued to see how it'll work. Plunder is one of those modes that in Warzone 1 I never got super into. Like, we used it, to be honest, to find Easter eggs more than anything, because there was no gas and you could respawn. Like, that was the biggest thing, is like, you could go investigate stuff and look at stuff without having to worry about if you die, you have to go and queue for a match again. So it's really interesting to see like other people who love Plunder. I know there was a big community of people who that was the main thing they played in Warzone. Like, they love playing Plunder, they love winning in Plunder, coming up with strategies to get the most money. I think that's really interesting. I also know loads of people who used it to level up guns and stuff like that. I did that a bit too. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what it's like. It'll be interesting to see, especially in the first couple of weeks, obviously, there'll be lots of people just trying it because it's kind of new to Warzone 2. And then when that simmers down a little bit and Warzone Ranked comes out, which, you know, should be coming out in just over 2 weeks, I imagine that then we'll start seeing like what Plunder's really going to be. Like, are they going to keep supporting it and changing it? What's the community going to be like for Plunder? I don't know. I'm always intrigued when there's kind of something big and new coming to Call of Duty. I've been a little bit disappointed that when they launched Gunfight at the beginning of Season 3, they haven't done anything else about Gunfight. I kind of expected them to be like, okay, then this weekend we're running our first Gunfight tournament, you know, where they used to do the thing where you win blueprints and things like that. I kind of thought that they might do something like that, but it doesn't look like it. It doesn't look like they're bothering. I mean, maybe they will. Maybe that'll be a part of Season 3 Reloaded. Who knows? But yeah, so Plunder. I don't know. Let me know in chat what you think, like whether you're excited about Plunder, or let me know in the comments if you're watching this later. I hope it's good. I'm kind of into just playing something new with Warzone. I'm fairly bored of Battle Royale right now. Like, I play it maybe once a week now, Battle Royale. I play DMZ a little bit more, but we're running out of missions, and once you've run out of missions in DMZ, it's kind of hard to work out what else you can do. I did a really cool video that you can check out on youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes yesterday, where we went into Building 21 to go get the mission where you had to get 9 different keys. Not keys, dog tags, sorry. 9 different dog tags, which in theory is the dog tags of every other player in Building 21. And we'd had loads of trouble with this before, where there just weren't enough players. Like, there was a solo or a duo on one of the other teams, which meant even though we killed everyone in Building 21, there weren't enough players to do it. And then yesterday, we managed to get 10 dog tags. Like, we managed to get more than we should have been able to. Well, not yesterday, maybe the day before. But yeah, that was very, very unusual. So I put it together in a video. You can come to your own conclusions about what exactly happened there. I've seen lots of people's theories about secure backpacks and stuff. Looking at what happened, I kind of don't think that's what happened. But maybe that's how it worked. I think we actually found 10 different backpacks by enemy players, like 10 different like bodies, which means that there's more people in Building 21 than we used to think. But I don't know. I'll let people in the comments work out what happened there. So the second news story is Horizon Forbidden West. Now, there's going to be some very minor, I would say quite minor spoilers for Horizon Forbidden West DLC. Although saying that, I haven't actually played the DLC, and I'm probably not going to. But basically, this game has been review bombed on Metacritic, or the DLC has been review bombed. So I think the critic rating is up, 7 or 8 out of 10. And the user rating is like 3 or something. And for a little bit of context, my experience with Horizon Forbidden West is like, it was a fine game. It was all right. I didn't enjoy the first one. What was the first one? Zero Dawn. I didn't enjoy it that much. I always thought the combat was really cool in Horizon, and the environment kind of looked cool, but I thought the game was entirely too long and too big for what it actually had. Like, I never thought any of the characters were particularly interesting. I never thought the story was interesting. There was kind of a bit of interesting story that in the game terms has happened like thousands of years ago. That's kind of interesting. But all the stuff that happens while you're playing it, I think isn't that interesting at all. And I'm not a massive fan of the main character or Ashley Birch, who's the voice actress. I just not for me really. So I've always had this kind of relationship with Horizon where it's like, yeah, it's kind of fun to play the combat. I finished the first game eventually. It took me a long while to go back to and finish it. When the new one came out, I played it through and finished it. I loved it for like the first 10 hours, just exploring the new environments, playing with the combat system was awesome. And then I feel like after about 10 hours, the sequel ran out of new ideas, but the game kept going for another like 10 or 20 hours. And it just felt like you were just going through the motions. So it's like, obviously there are new mechanics and new features, but all kind of variations on something. You get one thing that's fairly cool and new right at the end of the game. And it's just kind of, I couldn't be bothered with it personally. I could be bothered enough to finish it, but I couldn't be bothered to like stream it much or talk about it much because I just didn't think it was very good. So when the DLC was announced, and I saw people saying it's basically more of the same, like it's just, it's more of Horizon Forbidden West, which a lot of people like. I didn't really care, but I kept an eye on the reviews a little bit, and I was interested to see that people were review bombing it. And apparently, and again, this is where there will be some minor spoilers, so if you don't want minor spoilers for Horizon's Burning Shores DLC, please do skip ahead a couple of minutes. But yeah, so basically, apparently, there are 2 women that kiss in Horizon, like in the DLC. That is a thing that happens in the game. And that's enough for people to review bomb it, which seems utterly insane to me. That there's people playing this game who are like, oh yeah, we can cope with like this distant future where there's robot dinosaurs making up the ecosystem and marching around, and you're throwing spears with acid on and electricity and bombs and stuff like that. Like, that's all fine, but they're going to draw the line at the idea of people being gay. And it's like, it's just, I can't imagine the sort of thing that goes through someone's mindset where, like, if you're going on to Metacritic to leave a negative review because there's gay characters in it, surely at that point you just know that you're like homophobic and you're bigoted. Like, sometimes when you hear people say things that are kind of homophobic, you think, okay, they probably don't realize that they sound so homophobic. They think they're arguing from somewhere, some other place, some other thing that makes sense to them and how they were brought up, they probably don't actually just hate the idea of people being gay. But this, it's like I can't think of any other reasoning. Like I can't think of any reasoning like other than people being like, oh, these fictional characters in this video game I'm playing are gay and that makes me furious. Like what? Like surely as soon as someone feels that fury, they must be like, I'm broken. Like there's something wrong there. Like that's super, super weird. And obviously we've seen it before with other games and we've seen it with films and TV shows and stuff like that. And the kind of weird homophobic army that's often very closely linked to all of the other weird like phobias and weird kind of intolerance. I always find it funny on Twitter, when you see someone post something that's just like a horrendously bad take and normally very intolerant of someone else's way of life or who someone else's is. If you go onto their Twitter profile, pretty consistently, they also happen to be like into crypto. They're Trump supporters. They start going on about being like anti-woke and stuff like that. If they're in the UK, they'll be Tory voters and they'll be talking about how great Boris Johnson is. They'll be super pro-Brexit. There'll be anti-vaxxers as well. There's like a set of beliefs that seem to be enshrined where it's almost like, hey, you're a terrible person. Here, have like a handbook of all the things that you now need to believe. And a part of that is apparently that it's terrible for fiction to have any kind of queer or any kind of like relationships or love that's outside of their very narrow view of it. Because, like, I don't know, they think that it's going to corrupt children or something. They think that a child is going to see a gay character and then be like, oh, I think that's it. That seems like that's how I feel. And they're like, no, don't be true to yourself. Don't believe like the inner voice. Just like go and, suppress it down and live your life as a lie because that's what, I don't know, what the founding fathers would want, what God would want. I've got no idea. I just can't understand that viewpoint. But anyway, so yeah, spoilers over for Horizon, but they are review bombing it on Metacritic. They're being like, oh, we're going to give it bad reviews because of this, which also seems insane. Like, surely most people can tell when a game's being review bombed at this point, or a film's being review bombed. It's like when that Miss Marvel TV show came out, and it was, or Captain Marvel, the film came out, and it suddenly like gets, user reviews of like 1 out of 10. It's like, no Marvel movies are 1 out of 10. Even the Eternals isn't a 1 out of 10. It's like those movies, when they're really bad, are like 4s or 5s out of 10. And, when they're really good, they're like 7s or 8s. They fall into a very average range, like a very small average range. It's super obvious that when someone is giving it like 1 out of 10, that's because they've got irrationally angry about something. So then what effect does that possibly have? I suppose we have heard in the past that some people get like bonuses and stuff tied to Metacritic scores, but surely they never tie that to user scores. I don't think I've ever looked on Metacritic and cared about the user score ever. I do, on Steam sometimes, if there's a game that I'm thinking about trying. Like this morning, I saw on Steam charts one of the like games that's increased its player base the most recently is a game called Z1 Battle Royale. And when I saw it written down, I was like, oh, what's that? Is that some new game? I'll look at it. And then obviously very quickly I realized it's just H1Z1. And they keep renaming it. They keep trying to like rebrand it. I'm not sure how well it's working. I mean, with this, it's obviously on Steam charts, it's doing better. But then when you read the reviews, it's like, because that game's been about for so long, if you don't look at recent reviews and you just look at normal reviews, it's like all over the place and the reviews are just absolutely crazy. I mean, when I say it's doing well, it's gone from, on average, before like the weekend, it had around an average of like 1 to 200 people playing it on Steam. And then after the weekend, it's gone up to like 1,000 people playing it, which is obviously a big increase, but also not enough to really support a population. Which is a topic we'll probably talk about in a podcast tomorrow about game populations and stuff like that. But yeah, so I just find it really interesting. Like, what are these people trying to do with the review bombing? Do they think that do they think they're doing it as a hatred thing? Do they think they're doing it to try and make someone feel bad? Or do they think that they're doing it and it's going to change the entertainment industry? Like when like DeSantis is like going out and saying like, oh, Disney needs to stop all of this woke stuff in Disney World, and like we need to get rid of all of this like anti-racist, pro-LGBT stuff from Disney World because it's corrupting our children. Like, do these people think they're like him and like they're changing the world somehow to try and get rid of all of these things that they find uncomfortable? I don't know. Or are they just doing it because they hate someone? Are they just doing it because they want someone to feel bad? I like literally no idea. I mean, hopefully, if you're the sort of person that has ever left a review because of something like that, I would maybe reconsider. I would maybe just, sit down and think, why did I do that? What was the thinking behind that? Especially when you think of the issue. Like, I find it slightly weird, even when the issue is something valid. So, something like I keep talking about that 6 Days in Fallujah game where it's like glorifying what America was doing in Iraq with the house-to-house searches and stuff like that. Even something like that, and then people review bomb it because they're like, I find this politically distasteful, which, I do, or like Postal or something like that. I still don't think I would just leave a review. I don't think I would do something like that. I'd probably, I could post something on Twitter being like, hey, I think this kind of sucks that these people made this. But I don't know, the review bombing thing seems weird. It's like you're corrupting a completely unrelated system just out of spite. And I find that very strange. Like really, really bizarre. Just reading a little bit. Afa's, just reading the comments. Afa's saying the gaming community really needs to grow up. The rampant intolerance is gross. Yeah, I mean, it's not just the gaming community. I would say it's like the internet community, essentially. A lot of this are people who are. I saw this really funny tweet. Right, I'm going to read this to you. This is like not entirely relevant, but it describes the sort of people that I'm thinking of here. And I know this is offensive, and I don't really apologize if this offends you. This was something that someone was talking about. They're talking about Twitter verification, but they describe a type of person that I think is the sort of person who are leaving these reviews, whether it's about gaming, whether it's about movies, TV shows, books, whatever. And you get it in like the theme park community. I saw someone being like this on a theme park forum yesterday. But it says, anyway, there are really two main issues that make the new Twitter verification system a complete nightmare. The first is the user base. Very few normal users are willing to pay for a free social media site. Moreover, the main selling point of the service, so the Twitter verification, the blue tick, the $8 a month, is to boost post visibility. The service inherently appeals only to people who both A, care extremely deeply about their posts being seen, and B, make posts that are inherently unappealing to other Twitter users, since people with appealing or interesting or funny or not weird posts would be able to naturally grow an audience on a platform if they want to. So, like, that sort of person, I think, is definitely the sort of person that's leaving these reviews on Metacritic and Steam and stuff like that. The sort of person who really cares about their opinion being heard on these things, but also is so toxic or is so unlikable that people don't engage with them. So they just keep on like cranking the volume up, and they keep trying to find ways to make themselves be heard. And often that results in them joining other communities. So you end up with like incels and stuff like that. So the post continues. So pretty much every single blue check is a hyper online weirdo who's deeply bad at posting despite being obsessed with Twitter metrics. And someone who replied to this post, by the way, I looked on their profile and they had replied, they were like, oh no, we're not, blah, blah, blah. And then I saw that they'd replied to another tweet, just because I do this thing of looking at people's profiles, which is probably weird, but it always sort of makes me go like, oh, okay, yeah, I understand this person now. They'd replied to someone else. And someone was saying, like, what's the point of the Twitter blue check? It's just pointless now. And then they were like, well, is this pointless? And they posted, like, their Twitter analytics for the month. And, like, they were rubbish, really. Like, it was kind of, they'd had a few 100,000 engagements. And then they'd had, like, a handful of profile visits and, like, 100 new followers or something like that. Or 70 new followers. And it was just, like, and they were like, oh, well, this is what you get if you get the Twitter blue verification. Which is a weird way to think. I mean, I looked at my analytics, and all my analytics were much better than theirs, and I don't pay for the verification. And I'm not even very good at Twitter. I lose followers a lot of months because I post something a bit annoying. But yeah, anyway, so yeah, then this post carries on. There's a bit more to it, and it just describes the people in funny ways. The second is that verified replies get promoted to the top of every post. You have to scroll through all the blue check replies to get to even the most popular non-blue check replies. This is true even for blue check replies that have zero engagement or are completely off topic, or just straight up spam or scams. This, as a result, if you're looking for relevant discussion on a popular tweet, you have to first scroll past the thoughts of some of the most terminally online, inherently unlikable people on the planet. So normal users are constantly exposed to the most off-putting segments of the user base. This is it. Like, this is... I mean, I feel like this describes a lot of my problems with the internet over the last couple of years in every way. I mean, like, Twitter verification, the new blue check thing, has definitely made this worse. But it's so true, that line of sort of like... that you have to scroll past the thoughts of the most terminally online, inherently unlikable people. And that's it, that like you get this in gaming, you get it in movies, you get it everywhere where people are talking about entertainment, or where people are talking about anything. You get it obviously in politics and stuff like that as well. Just people who are constantly online and nowhere else. Like, they don't lead a life. They don't lead like a normal life at all. And they're just constantly online, posting their opinions that people hate. And I think that they think, like, you know, they're right. They think they're smarter than everyone else. They think they've seen something that other people haven't had. And the internet allows them to slowly, like, cluster up and to find, like, subreddits or 4chan boards or stuff with people who are, like-minded like them. But they're so unlikable. And then when they start seeping into other environments, so you start seeing them coming into, like, Call of Duty chat conversations, or you see them coming into theme park conversations or whatever, they're just awful. But some platforms make it so, like, they end up dominating. They end up kind of taking over. And I think that's something that happened with Call of Duty a while ago, where they tried to, like, Call of Duty in the early-ish days of, you know, the first set of Modern Warfare games, I think they really tried to create this kind of bro culture of, like, hyper, like, masculine, toxic kind of competitiveness that was really, really odd. You know, like when you used to watch Call of Duty tournaments that they broadcast, it would be like little boys screaming at each other at the top of their lungs on a stage. And they were like, you know, celebrating this, being like, look at that passion, like, whoa. And it's, I mean, that's ridiculous. That's insane. And that kind of community, that kind of group of people who thought that screaming about Call of Duty or screaming about, like, you know, beating someone at a video game or how someone else is playing a video game was acceptable. They got held on a pedestal, and it sort of formed this community. It attracted a lot of these terminally online kind of weirdos, essentially. And to this day, you still have it in the Call of Duty community. There are increasingly more and more normal people playing Call of Duty and more normal people posting stuff about it. And you can often tell the difference. Like, the more normal people don't tend to be constantly just talking about Call of Duty. They talk about a wide range of things and Call of Duty. You know, and if you follow them on Twitter and Instagram and stuff, you see them going to other places and doing other things. And then there's always like a portion of that community that's just constantly complaining about Call of Duty, just constantly getting in dramas to do with Call of Duty. And it's like, this isn't healthy. Like, this isn't good. And I think this is how you end up with these kind of crazy hate campaigns against games, and how do you get these crazy, like, review bombing campaigns and stuff like that, where a group of these people get so worked up and they're like, this is our power. Like, this is the thing we can influence. We can influence the score on Metacritic for the Horizon DLC. And it's like, oh my God, that's like nothing. Like, that's so sad. But yeah. I think that's what's happening. Anyway, sorry, I'll stop with my just insulting a load of people on the internet, but I think they're very annoying. So, carrying on, just reading some of the chat. Matty Kelly said, all Marvel movies are 1 out of 10 for you. I don't like them. I just don't think that makes sense. To me, at least, that doesn't make sense. Like, I know, obviously, reviewing is like a subjective thing. The Marvel movies are not 1 out of 10 movies. I don't know if I've ever seen a 1 out of 10 movie. Like, sometimes you watch, like, weird kind of student-made indie movies, and they're like deeply unfunny or technically terrible, or they don't make sense. You've got to get to like that end of something for something to be a 1 out of 10. Like, there's a whole scale. I think a lot of Marvel movies are just deeply average and quite boring. Like, a lot of them, I would say, are 4 or 5s out of 10. And then, like, you know, and like some of them are really good, and then they're kind of 7 or 8s out of 10. I would say that they all kind of fall within that scale. I'm not sure if I would say any of the Marvel movies are, like, to me, 9 or 10s out of 10. But I'd also say none of them are like 1, 2, or 3s. All of them have some entertainment value. And I think, like, you know, that's another conversation about the internet that we'll get into some other time, about the kind of binary view that people have of of things on the internet, where it's like stuff has to either be trash or it has to be amazing, and there's nothing in between. Like, you have to polarize, you have to be against something or for it. And I think that's a very damaging thing on the internet. We've talked about that a couple of times, I guess. Don't forget to like the stream, by the way. If you're watching live, it does really help if you like it. So thank you so much to everyone that already has. Microcept said, I really don't believe many of these are from the gaming community, just people looking for a reaction. Maybe. It could be people who just love internet drama. Alpha says, user reviews can be good if a patch fixes a major problem. You can usually see the trend. I'd agree with that on Steam. I don't think on Metacritic. On Metacritic, like the whole score thing, I don't know. I like the way on Steam you can say, like, you can have a game where it says, like, all time, and it's like mixed reviews, but then recently, overwhelmingly positive. It's like, oh, they did something cool. Like, what have they done? That I do find useful. Texas said, I saw this characterization of people who want to buy the blue tick. Spot on. It really is. It's just like, the blue tick thing is super weird. Like, it's so weird. And it's kind of, it's destroyed the point. Like, the blue tick, I genuinely think was like, obviously it was a flawed system about who got on, who didn't. I have always thought the blue tick system should have been something that you could pay for. I've always said this, that the blue tick should be something where however much money it costs Twitter to verify someone is who they say they are, I think that's something that is valuable and worth paying for. So maybe they would automatically give it to some people who were just notable, and then other people could pay for it just to be verified that they are who they say they are. Because I think that's a useful thing on social media, that if you're saying you are like a company or a creator or a person who people might have heard of, it's good to be able to say, I am actually that person. Like, I'm not just some imposter. Like, I always thought that was the point of it. And the thing that they've done with the new blue ticks is they've just like tried to give a load of stuff where it's like, hey, anyone can be important with this. Like, you know, anyone, like, it'll mean that everyone can see your posts. Everyone will be able to see that you've got the blue tick next to your name. But they're not verifying anyone who is who they're saying they are. Like, that's the problem to me. If they like did this, so, oh, you pay $8 a month and we verify, we go through a process with you to verify you are who you say you are, then that becomes like, you know, kind of a more useful thing. $8 a month seems like a bit much, but that seems a more useful thing. But taking away the verification bit just, it's so stupid. It's so dumb. Really hate it. Reading, carrying on for this. Hey, Joe W, how's it going? Alpha said, do you need to professionally use Twitter? If the answer is no, then you do not need verification. And even if you do, it's not a requirement. I mean, I would say, like I said, people could, like, famous people could socially use Twitter and just use a social media platform, but they want to make it clear that they are that person rather than someone else. And I think lots of people maybe don't even care about using Twitter, but they don't want someone else impersonating them, so they can make an account and get it verified. And even if they don't use it, at least that account exists. You can find it, say, oh, that's the real person. They don't actually use Twitter. Some people, you know, used to have like a pinned message left up saying like, I don't use Twitter. I've just done this to sort of stop someone else pretending they're me. And I think that was useful. But, you know, wanting people to know who you are is important. Like, I've had people, I'm basically a nobody. Like, not that many people in the world know who I am. And I've had people on Twitter pretend to be me and contact game companies asking for codes for games that obviously then I don't end up streaming because I didn't get the code. I don't know anything about it, so then it makes me look bad. I've had someone doing a sort of parody account thing, but some people thought it was the real person and said it was the real person, including some quite famous streamers and content creators. And this person was just like trying to post leaks and things like that and like data mine stuff to try and make me look bad because, you know, I'm so against it all, and now like they're like, oh, well, I'm going to spread all these leaks. I've had people doing that a bunch, and it's kind of, if I get people trying to impersonate me on Twitter, I imagine anyone who's famous, anyone who like is a household name especially, but even within a community, anyone who is like well known is going to have way bigger problems. Like if Twitter were like, hey, we're willing to go through a process with you, you know, we'll sit down on a Discord call with you and just check that you are who you say you are. Like then we'll give you a verified tick. I'd be like, yeah, 100%, do it. But I'm not going to pay for something that isn't verification. It's just like, hey, I'm paying to get my posts seen more on Twitter. That seems super weird. Dave said, I've got no problem with gays. They found someone of the same sex that makes them happy, good on them. I just don't like watching it. I don't think that makes me homophobic. I mean, obviously homophobic, the word is kind of, you know, this idea of fear being incorporated into it seems like, you know, a bit misleading. I know people pick up on that. But you see, that's a bit weird. Like, if someone said, if Dave, if someone said, like, oh, I don't have a problem with, like, white people, but I don't want to see them. I don't want them to be in films and TV show stuff. You'd probably be like, that's pretty racist. And it's like, saying that about gay people is kind of like, I don't want to see evidence of you being who you are on TV or on films or on games. That's a weird kind of stance to take, isn't it? Like, surely you just accept that there are people who are different to you, and games and TV and media and any entertainment is going to reflect that. It's not saying you will be forced to go out of your way to find things that are expressly about that, although I don't know if that would actually be a bad thing. But them existing in media, like, that's not a bad thing. Like, it's not going to upset you, the fact that you're, like, reminded that gay people exist. Like, that's not going to be something that shouldn't be allowed in games. That seems super weird to me. Yeah, like, I think, like, the homophobia thing, like, a lot of people get, like, hung up on this phobic thing of it, and people are like, well, I'm not actually scared of gay people, I just don't want to see them. And it's like, but you're sort of saying, by saying you don't want to see them, you're saying, so people shouldn't make things that show them. So, like, oh, if you're a gay person working in game development and you want to include some of your identity in a game, like, don't do that because there might be some straight people that don't want to see that. Like, that's weird, isn't it? Like, that's a weird stance to take. It should just be like, yeah, like, games and any art, any entertainment reflects life. There are gay people in life. There can be gay people in games. Like, there can be gay people in stories, just the same as there can be, religious people. I don't agree with religious people. I don't mind religious people existing, but I personally don't want to see people talking about religion, stuff like that. I don't, like, get up and walk out of a movie theater because someone starts praying. I don't, like, sort of, like, in a game, if there's, like, a church, I'm like, well, this is awful. I don't agree with religion. I don't want to see this. Like, you just sort of accept it, that you can see things that you don't agree with. I think that's, to me, one of the big kind of, what's the word? One of the big contradictions in this whole intolerant, right-wing, left thing, woke, whatever, thing that people talk about, is that you see a lot of right-wing people or conservative people being very much like, oh, these left-wing snowflakes, they get offended so easily. But then it's the right-wing people, the intolerant people, who are like, I don't want to see this in my video game. I don't want to see this in my film. I don't want to hear this word. I don't want to have this idea shown to me. And it's like, you're the people getting offended by this. You're the people getting upset by this. You're getting upset by something that doesn't affect you at all. It's like something that is probably a very positive thing for lots of other people, and it doesn't affect you. It doesn't hurt you in any way. But then you're just you're choosing to be offended by it. You're choosing to be upset by it. Like, that to me is the sort of weird, delicate, fragile thing of, like, why should other things be created around your existence? And it's like, there's a difference, I think, because then people say, like, oh, well, then why are you bothered about people being racist or homophobic or transphobic or anything like that? Like, you're a snowflake, you're a hypocrite because then you're upset by that. But it's like, but those things are particularly hating on someone's identity. Like, those things are attacking someone. Someone, like, a man loving another man isn't hurting anyone. It's not attacking anyone. It's not negative to anyone. Someone saying to someone, you can't love another man, that's wrong. That is hateful. That's a negative thing. So it's like, that's why people don't want that sort of stuff happening, because it's kind of, why are you attacking someone else's life that doesn't affect you? But, like, also on the other hand of that, the other sort of side of that, why would anyone have a problem with having stuff like that presented to them, like the positive side of it? You know what I mean? And obviously there's grey areas. Again, we're going back into this binary thing. There's grey areas where it's like, what about things that are socially unacceptable? What about things that are legally unacceptable? And, people often draw a line, like vegetarians not wanting to see, like, meat being prepared or something like that. And it's like, yeah, fair enough. Like, meat kind of is murder. Meat kind of is a terrible thing. There's definitely something weird about that. But, meat eating is pretty much socially acceptable, so people don't care so much. At some point that might change. At some point things like that might be different. So there's definitely, like, a scale here. But I personally would say, saying that I mean, it's difficult. What Dave said, Dave didn't say these things shouldn't be in games or these things shouldn't be in that. If he's just saying he doesn't like watching it, then kind of, I don't think anyone can say anything about that. I don't think if he says he doesn't want to watch gay people, then it's like, fine, don't watch gay people. Okay. So if there's something with gay people, then don't watch it. That doesn't mean you need to then go and try and make it so people make less of that stuff. Or that doesn't mean you need to go and share those opinions around or anything like that. It can be like a personal taste thing, like fine, whatever. But as soon as you start saying people shouldn't put this stuff in games, or people shouldn't put this stuff in movies, or people shouldn't present this, or, you know, like, this is bad because of this, as soon as you get to that point, I think that's when you're being homophobic. That, to me, is the problem. Representation of all groups of people is really important. Yeah, Raffers, I think that's something that I've, like, struggled with over my life, is coming to a mental agreement with the whole representation thing, because again, it's very easy it's a very easy thing to find loopholes in. It's like, what do you need to have representation of, like, you know, people who are horrific in you know, legal or societal or ethical eyes? What about groups who are incredibly small, where there's only like 1 or 2 people? Is it important for them to be verified? You know, you don't want to get into tokenism and stuff like that, of being like, oh, well, we've got this like image of 5 people, we need to make sure that they cover as many different races and sexualities and levels of disability and all of those things as possible. You know, you can end up with like a weird situation. But I think more like natural representation is important. Like, it's something that should just be expected. It's not something even that's like, or like, oh, it's fine, it should be allowed. It's like, it should just be, people make stuff about the world and about the people they know and about experiences and stuff like that. And it should be fine to make stuff about whatever that range of things is. You know, like, that's what, like, reflecting the world. And then, you know, there is a lot of argument for going out of your way to represent underrepresented groups. Like, I'm always super impressed when we go to Disney World, where, like, there are loads of little black girls dressing up as Tiana and getting excited when they see Tiana, who is the only black Disney princess. And it's like, before Princess and the Frog, there wasn't a black Disney princess. There was loads of black little girls looking at the Disney princesses and being like, that's for white kids. That's not for me. Like, that's not something to do with me. That was like a really positive step. And it's like, really, the problem is that it didn't exist before. It was like, you know, righting a wrong. And at least they did it in a natural way, you know, with an authentic sort of story that made a bit more sense for that. That can be done very badly. You know, you can get tokenism that's very bad, obviously. But I think, like, the idea of representation in general should be like, in a perfect world, everyone should have equal opportunities to create art and create entertainment. And through that, naturally, everyone would be represented. But in reality, white middle-class men are massively overrepresented because they're the ones who have the power and the opportunity to make stuff. So, like, they end up sort of dominating entertainment and their experiences. So then you kind of need some sort of forced representation to make more of it. Man, this has got into a deep conversation. This isn't what I expected to be talking about today. Hooey. Right, just going on to do... Midago, I respected blue ticks, especially as verification of people who actually are who they say they are. I see it as an important part of social media safety. Yeah, 100%. 100% Midago. I never had this problem. I think I saw some other take about the blue tick thing where someone was saying that, you know, like, oh, it was this elitist thing and we needed to dismantle it. You know, we don't want this class system on Twitter. It was super weird. I never saw it like that. I saw it as like, okay, these blue ticks are people who are notable. If a blue tick replied to one of my things, I would be like, oh, that's cool, that person, like, I know them, I know who they are, I know they're notable in some way. Like, I didn't really see it as like a bad elitist class system. I just saw it as like, hey, these people are who they say they are. And occasionally I would get annoyed. I'd be like, oh, this person isn't that notable, like, this person isn't that more well-known than I am, and they got a blue tick and I didn't. And, you know, that was often because of, like, gaming organizations and stuff like that. I did get annoyed about it, but it wasn't the end of the world. It was just a mild annoyance that I would have liked to have been part of that club, I guess. Right, anyway, carrying on. Unrecorded is looking sick. We talked about Unrecorded yesterday, Treebird. Make sure you watch yesterday's podcast. We did talk about it a bit. I don't know if Dave's going to be coming back, Affers. Hi, Lord of Terror. Games are escapism. I have no problem escaping into characters that are not like you. Yeah, I mean, and there's a difficulty, High Lord Terror, isn't there? There's like people like you and me who are, if you're again, if you're a white middle class man, a white middle class straight man, especially sort of like middle aged ish, it's very easy to talk about these kind of things like representation in a very abstract way and be like, well, I don't mind, like, blah blah blah, and it's like, but we are obviously in this situation where we've grown up with everything basically catering to us, like everything in the entertainment industry basically being directly for us, and I think there's a group of some people who are just sort of, they're upset that that's not as true as it used to be. They, like they play a game and they're like, I've got to play as a woman. What? Like, oh, I've got to play as a gay person. Like, oh my god, I can't possibly imagine such a thing, because they've grown up always playing as someone that's basically them. It's like with character creators. My wife's always laughing about how I can always make a character that looks exactly like me because I just pick, a bald white guy with a beard, and it's like it always looks like me. It's like very, very, very easy to do that. And there's lots of people who aren't represented at all. And when Battlefield 5 did their trailer and they were saying like, hey, in the character customization you can have like women and prosthetic limbs and stuff like that, and like some weirdos on the internet kicked off about it, like, this isn't historically accurate, blah blah blah. It's because those people were probably white men who would have been represented in the game, and they like don't, for some reason, don't like the idea that other people will be able to play a game with a character that looks like them. They don't seem to be bothered about the lack of historical accuracy with like respawning and stuff. But yeah, Fogger. And I still, I have to say, like, this is me being intolerant. I still think whenever I hear someone say that they don't like The Last of Us Part 2, I still immediately think that they're like homophobic or transphobic or something. I still think they're a bigot. I just think that game is like so close to being a perfect game that whenever someone says they didn't like it, my immediate reaction is, what's going on there? Like, there's something wrong there. Like, you've got some weird motive for not liking that game, like all the time. Right, so we're going to move on. I mean, I wouldn't get into like personal trying to work out what other people think here, Affers and Dave and stuff like that, because it's never going to end well. We can carry on talking in our more generic, abstract way, rather than launching into trying to investigate the personal beliefs of a complete stranger to us. So, got a couple more news stories, and then again, I'm always like, I'm going to stick to time. We've just spent like half an hour talking about that. I'm going to run through the next couple of news stories. Kotaku ran an article on a PlayStation boss cancelling so many games. This is kind of a briefly interesting article. It's not really news, but it's something I think a lot of people don't realize in gaming. So Shuei Yoshida, who is the PlayStation boss, I guess, was basically saying games are super expensive and difficult to make, and they cancel a lot of them. So as they go through, they say they cancel so many games in order to save developers from getting stuck on something. And I think it's hard to wrap your head around what a big deal that is. Like, imagine if you're PlayStation. I imagine PlayStation already have pretty solid plans for the PlayStation 6. That will probably come out in like, 3-4 years. And they probably have ideas about what games they want to be on that platform, like what games they want to be launch titles for it, and then what games they want to come out in 2025 and 2024. So they'll have these games, and then obviously games take, AAA games generally take like 3 or 4 years to make, sometimes much longer. So those games some of them will have already started being worked on probably. Some of those games will be, the games that are meant to be coming out next year and the year after will be quite far in development. So they try and fill their calendar with like, okay, we've got a big game coming out at Christmas in this genre, we've got a family-friendly game coming out this time, blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes, like, you're making all those plans when these games haven't even been made yet. Then sometimes 2 years into a game, after millions of dollars have been spent, they'll be looking at the game and be like, this is going to be a bad game. Like, the idea just didn't work. The technology wasn't there. Maybe some of the key people left for various reasons, and now like there isn't the expertise that there used to be. Maybe things are coming together and the idea just wasn't as fun as people thought. Maybe the gaming industry kind of moved on, like trends moved on. So, they were working on some big like battle royale game, and now they're like, we don't really think that's a big deal anymore. Maybe a similar game comes out and fails dramatically. Maybe there was another company working on something like Dreams that Media Molecule was working on, and then they saw, oh, Dreams didn't actually pick up any traction. Like, our game is basically that. It's going to do the same thing. Or like, Marvel's Avengers. People, I think, thought that was going to be a big deal, and it just wasn't. I imagine then Rocksteady making the Justice League game, the Suicide Squad game, were a bit like, oh no, this is a worry. This is a problem. You know, an Anthem as well, like these big live service failures. So like loads of games just get cancelled, and then there's a gap. Like there's now a gap in the calendar. There's a gap in the plan, and they can't fill it. It's not like they can just put another game there because games take so long to make. So you end up with these weird gaps, and it's like lots of years. Like, you know, PlayStation will just not have a big game. Like last year, they didn't really have something super significant at the sort of the last half of the year, other than God of War Ragnarok, and so everything was kind of resting on that. This year, it's, you know, Spider-Man. It's kind of everything's resting on Spider-Man. And, you know, Xbox have obviously been through the same thing where they announced, all, like, you know, they acknowledged that they didn't really have that great of a slate for first-party studios. You know, they had Forza and Gears of War and Halo, and then they announced all these things like Fable that was being worked on by Playground Games, and the Initiative, like a new studio created to make a new Perfect Dark game. And they had all these things. And then it's like, obviously, the Initiative, loads of people have left. That's not seemingly working out very well. Fable, we haven't heard from it for ages. Everwild, the Rare game, that apparently got rebooted. Like, that's kind of gone now. Halo Infinite didn't work out so well, didn't get the reception they wanted. Even Forza 5 wasn't necessarily as good as people wanted it to be, or wasn't as successful. And it's kind of Microsoft are now, like, in this situation where if they tried to fix the problem now, we won't actually notice for another, like, 3 or 4 years, which is, you know, where we were 3 or 4 years ago. So it makes life super difficult. And it's the same thing, you know, going back to something we talk about a bit more, the same thing happens with Call of Duty, doesn't it? That with Call of Duty, you have, like, all of the games are going to be worked on probably about 3 years in advance. You know, like, so Modern Warfare 2019 comes out, and then 2020, you have Black Ops Cold War. 2021 you have Vanguard, so then 2022 you have the next Modern Warfare. So they had kind of 2 or 3 years, depending on how you look at it, to support the original game, but then also make the new game. And what if that goes wrong? What if, like, along the development, they're just like, that doesn't work? Like, someone important leaves, a game idea they had didn't work very well, but now they're committed to having a Call of Duty game every year. They're suddenly in, like, a lot of trouble. They're suddenly, like, getting a little bit stuck. And, you know, I know there's lots of theories about whether that happened with Black Ops Cold War, that whether Vanguard was meant to come out that year and then actually Black Ops Cold War stepped up and was rushed to try and fit in the gap because Vanguard wasn't ready or whatever. There's lots of ideas about that. We never hear about that because companies don't like talking about, you know, stuff that's going wrong for them, maybe. And that's, I think, why this news story is a big deal, that having someone, the boss of PlayStation, or he's the former boss of PlayStation, not current, I didn't say that at the beginning. The former boss of PlayStation coming out and saying, like, oh yeah, like, we cancel games all the time. It doesn't work out all the time. We lose a bunch of money. It's terrible. Like, coming out and saying that is, like, I think quite important, that people might realize, hey, game development is really hard at all levels. There is not a company that is successful at doing this. You know, Rockstar have not made a new Grand Theft Auto for 10 years. I can't imagine that they wanted to have a 10-year gap before the next one. But a big part of that might be that Dan Houser, the person behind Grand Theft Auto, left the company. They've probably been struggling a little bit in that time. And hopefully they'll end up coming out with something amazing and something incredible, like Grand Theft Auto 5 was, or Red Dead Redemption 2 was. But it doesn't mean that it was, like, smooth sailing to get there. I think a lot of time when people hear about the stuff in Call of Duty, when they hear about something going wrong in a studio or something going wrong with a game, they're like, oh, well, it's because they're incompetent. It's because they don't know what they're doing, blah, blah. It's like, no, it's probably just the reality of these big projects. That it's like, they take a very long time to make. We generally don't hear about the games until, like, a year before they release. But up till then, there's, like, 2 years of work that has all been done in secret that we hear nothing about. And it's kind of interesting when something goes terribly wrong with it. And then finally, the final news story is that Microsoft says Xbox revenue is down 4%, mostly because they say consoles aren't selling that well. And I think this is kind of an interesting thing. I don't want to get into any console wars nonsense. I'm a bit of an Xbox fanboy, I guess. I do have a PlayStation 5, but I prefer my Xbox a lot more. I think this, to me at least, is because there haven't been many good games for the last couple of years. Like, for the last few years, all of the really good games have either been third party, so like Elden Ring, or they've been free to play, you know, stuff like Warzone and Fortnite and things like that. I think, like, the lack of those big exclusives does hurt consoles. And Microsoft's whole push of, like, hey, you can play our games on PC, you can play our games on a phone using cloud streaming, you can play our games on last generation consoles and stuff like that as well. must hurt the hardware sales. I'm surprised that it hasn't affected PlayStation as much as well, because I think like PlayStation haven't had the exclusives either. They haven't had like games that you needed a PlayStation 5 to play. But yeah, I mean, this isn't a comparison thing, so maybe they are and they just haven't said. But I think like this makes sense that overall, I would say, and this might be another topic for a podcast in future, maybe later this week. Overall, I would say this generation has been disappointing. That I'm still enjoying the same games now that I was enjoying before these consoles came out. And most of the games that I've been enjoying now would have been possible on those previous consoles, and in fact came out also on those previous consoles. There's been very little about the Xbox Series X or the PlayStation 5 that has been something where I'm like, oh, I'm so glad I bought the console for this game. I love the Xbox Series X making old games run better. That's been really cool, and it seems to do it pretty consistently. And I love Game Pass and the way that's continued. But there isn't something where I'm like, oh, like the power of the Xbox Series X has really made this game much better. All of that stuff that both Sony and Microsoft talked about with like loading times and stuff like that just hasn't really come to much. There hasn't been a game. I've played all of the big first-party games. None of them have really done something that other games haven't been able to do in the past, and I think that's a real shame. I think Xbox One was really the era of Game Pass and like making free-to-play games easy to use and work well and all of that sort of stuff. That was something that I really associate with that generation. And I think this generation is just more of that. Like, it hasn't really evolved or pushed on, so maybe that's why. But speaking of things that would make this generation a bit more worthwhile, we've now got 10 minutes to talk about what is the next big thing. Like, what's the next big thing that's going to happen? Bod's just said in chat, one thing you saw, apparently Sony's been paying third parties not to work with Microsoft. Yeah, this all came out in the, this whole Activision-Microsoft merger deal thing when they were doing a court case. I think in the American side of it, or maybe it was the European one or the UK one, I don't know. But in a load of documents, it came out that basically Sony were saying to companies, hey, like, we'll pay you for this deal, and as part of this deal, your game can't be on Game Pass, like, ever. Like, you can't do these deals with Microsoft. And apparently that was pretty common, because obviously it's pretty common for the publisher, for the platform holders to be like, hey, we want to sign an exclusivity deal where we get to put your game out and you don't get to put it out on a competitor's console. That's pretty common. Like, that happens quite a lot. And Sony obviously do that all the time, just as Microsoft has done it sometimes. And but like, apparently Sony have been like going out of their way with some companies just to be like, hey, we're not doing an exclusivity deal, but we'll market your game as long as you agree never to put it on Game Pass and stuff like that, which is a bit cheeky. And they have to sign things saying that like it'll never be cheaper on Xbox, or there'll never be any patches that make it run better on Xbox than it does on PlayStation and stuff like that. Lots of sneaky stuff that kind of, I think, is why the UK board, is it this week or next week that they have to make their agreement, where they've ended up saying like, yeah, the Activision deal can go ahead because, Microsoft seem like they know what they're talking about, that they don't think exclusivity is a good thing. Anyway, let's go back to this. So, what do we think the next big thing is? Have we got any ideas from chat about what the next big genre will be? I've got a few ideas I'd like to hear. Summoning Key saying, I'm so hyped for Geeky to go ham on 2024 zombies. It'll be interesting if we even get zombies next year and what form it takes. I think a lot of people who are big zombies fans, personally, and this is not based on any knowledge at all, this is my speculation, I think zombies won't be a massive part of next year's game. I think it'll be a very similar situation to Black Ops Cold War, where we'll get some zombies maps that are pretty much based on campaign maps or multiplayer maps, and then we'll get Outbreak. I really think that's the chance. I just don't think there's as many people that play zombies as zombies players think there are. But yeah, we'll see. It'll be better than Vanguard zombies. That'll be good. So what sort of things do people think? Has anyone come up with any ideas for what's going to happen? Preza said, this was a while ago he said this, I sometimes feel like gaming development stagnated with the amount of remakes, remasters, sequels, and prequels. Devs have either run out of ideas or aren't willing to take risks. I definitely think that's a big part of it. I think, like, You see it with films as well and TV shows. There's so many remakes of things or things that are made in the same style as something else. You know, people are like, hey, let's do Lost, but let's do it with a girls' football team instead. Or let's do like Breaking Bad, but we're going to do it with some like mild mannered middle class people instead. Actually, that's basically what Breaking Bad is, isn't it? But yeah, I think there's a lot of that kind of idea of doing remakes and stuff. You know, I saw a tweet earlier today where it's like, the best games so far this year have been Resident Evil 4, Dead Space, and Metroid Prime. It's like those are like not far off. Like I can't think of many other games that have done really well this year, other than like 3 remakes of good old games. And you know, films. You look at like films that are doing really well. It's like the Top Gun remake is doing really well. Scream 6, Avatar 2. It's lots of games, lots of films that are either based on old properties or just literally remaking properties. Afas said the next 2 games to dominate the conversation are going to be Elder Scrolls 6 and GTA 6. I have no idea what a new massive genre will be. I definitely think GTA 6 will be huge for sure. Elder Scrolls 6, I'm pretty sure I don't think that'll be the next game to dominate conversation. Elder Scrolls 6, I think they said that they weren't going to go into full production of it until Starfield came out. And Starfield's not coming out until September, if it comes out in September. So I wouldn't expect to see Elder Scrolls 6 for another 3 or 4 years. I think we'll be waiting literally until like 2027 before we see that game come out. That's a long way off, I think. I reckon it'll be next gen, like not current gen. But yeah, GTA 6 I think will be a big deal when it comes out, like always. But I'm always interested in seeing like, and you know, GTA 6, they don't care what genres. I don't expect there'll be like a GTA extraction shooter type thing or anything like that. Although, I mean, they could do something like that. But I think like they'll just do their own thing. They'll just keep doing their own Grand Theft Auto thing. No one really cares. Bod says looters and extraction seem to be making a big introduction, seeing as we had EFT and DMZ. We also have Heartland that's been announced and Dead Drop. I mean, I don't think many people are taking Dead Drop seriously. I think Dead Drop's a bit of a joke in the or at least in the industry, I think it is. Like there's a lot of people being like, what are they doing? Like they haven't made anything that looks it Dead Drop haven't made anything that looks interesting in any way yet. Like you think all games need like a hook or unique selling point. The unique selling point for Dead Drop is that it's involved with Dr. Disrespect and it's got NFTs in it. And obviously NFTs, you know, that's kind of passed by now. There was all those people being like, oh, by 2023, everything will be using NFTs. It's like, nope, still a joke. And yeah, so it's just really reliant on a Dr. Disrespect meme. So I'm not sure it's enough to play the game. I know people keep saying in the Dead Drop community, I sometimes check in on their Discord and read what they're talking about. I know, like, there's still, like, a lot of this thing of, like, oh, well, the game's just early yet, but it will be amazing. And it's like, but there's nothing about it that looks amazing. And we've seen other games like that Unrecorded, or like that game that Jack Frags was playing the other day, where it's like, you know, the jumping through and the slow motion stuff. Other games that are prototypes that are already much more accomplished and much more interesting than what Dead Drop is, that's supposedly a AAA game that still doesn't have any kind of unique hook or interesting thing about it, and the mechanics seem really bad. And it seems quite ugly. It's just, yeah, there's nothing. I don't think that is anything to take seriously. But yeah, the extraction shooter thing, I think, is definitely a possibility. The extraction shooters could end up being like a big wave. I think, like, again, like there being this lag of AAA games taking. Sorry, I got my throat. Quite bad today. Of people taking like 3 years to make a AAA game, and like Escape from Tarkov was kind of a bit of a breakout hit. I still don't know what the player numbers are like for Tarkov, because obviously it's not on Steam. It's done through their own launcher and stuff like that. I'm very dubious about pretty much everything to do with that company, to be honest. But yeah, we don't know how many people are playing Tarkov or anything like that. But it's an interesting thing. It's something a bit new. It's built off, you know, stuff like DayZ and stuff like that came before. It annoys me a bit when people are like, Escape from Tarkov's the first extraction shooter. And it's like, The Division was literally doing the extraction shooter thing. Like, the first Division game, you went into the dark zones, and it was expressly, you are fighting AI and other players. Sometimes you're doing other missions, you're finding loot. Other players can kill you in there and betray you and stuff. You need to extract with that loot, and if you don't extract, you lose it. Like, that was very much an extraction shooter. Like, they just put out the genre, and it was fun. It worked really well. I just don't think it had enough of a player base, and maybe the loot didn't have enough variety and the missions didn't have enough variety, but the core of that game mode was there in the Division. So yeah, I'm definitely interested in the Heartlands. I think with the extraction shooter thing, a big thing that they need to work out, and I think a company will do very well if they do work out, is a way to make it have the feeling of tension and being kind of, um, exciting and feeling rewarding and feeling like there's some risk, but getting rid of some of the PvP aspects. I think like a lot of people like the PvP aspects of DMZ, and I do, I really do. But you see it everywhere. Like the number of comments of people who want that kind of feeling of a game, but they also don't want the risk of losing because another player is better than them. And that's something, there's always going to be players who are better than you. There's always going to be people who are better than you. So if you've got any PvP at all, and the Division had the same thing where, and hacking was a problem, and people learnt strategies that would let them kill you very, very easily, that felt a bit unfair. Like, that's always going to be a problem with PvP. So someone needs to make an extraction shooter where the PvP either doesn't matter or just isn't there. And, with AI increases and stuff like that, I think that's definitely possible. I think that's a big reason why people like playing games like GTA Online, where there's not that much PvP a lot of the time, or people like playing games like Payday, or people like playing things like Call of Duty Zombies that we were talking about earlier. I think a lot of the reason people like that is because you're just playing against a computer, and the computer's fairly easy to beat and fairly predictable, and you can get good at it just by practice. And, you don't have other players who are also getting better than you at the same time. It's just kind of, if you play it enough, you will get good at it. Like, I've always said that I think a big part of the reason Zombies is so popular in Call of Duty is because it's easy compared to multiplayer or Battle Royale, where, you're always up against people who are potentially better than you. Zombies, the enemy's always the same. And so it's always, even though the first time you play it, it can be hard, you can learn how to do it and there's tricks to do it and it'll always be the same. It stays the same, your skill level goes up while its difficulty stays the same. So you kind of at some point surpass the difficulty level, you feel like you're making progress, you feel like you're good at the game. Something like Warzone, the difficulty of Warzone is kind of like going up at the same time and your skill level might go up, and at some point the average player base might be better than you, and then you'll be having a bad time because people do just keep getting better at those games. So yeah, I think someone making an extraction shooter work that has co-op, has all the social aspects, but doesn't have other players in it, or doesn't have PvP in it, will be quite a big deal. And, Sea of Thieves has been pretty successful, and that's kind of very similar to an extraction shooter and stuff like that. Bio said most multiplayer games haven't been as interesting to you, so you've been branched out into single-player games and excited for a lot of upcoming games. Yeah, I definitely think there's a bit of a renaissance with single-player games. Like Mazago saying, Indiana Jones, Fable, we've got Starfield coming out soon, we've got Jedi Survivor obviously coming out in a couple of days. We've got loads of cool single-player games coming out. I think there's Spider-Man. There's a bunch of stuff that's pushing that. And I think, again, people are getting a little bit fed up of a lot of the PvP stuff now. And I do wonder if that's where the next big thing will be. Like, to me, that's it. Not just with extraction shooters, I suppose, with everything, is co-op and single-player experiences getting better and more exciting and more varied. Things like roguelites where it's got, like, infinite replayability. Stuff like Destiny, where you've got loads of co-op experiences. I think that's probably where it's going. I think we're going to see less and less PvP. Because as soon as you get PvP, you get all of the toxicity that goes along with it. You have all of the problems with like network connections and lag and stuff like that. You get cheating. You get like, just the idea of whether the way other people is playing is fair. You have balance issues. Like, there's so many problems that come out from letting players compete against each other, that if you make the main part of the game just fighting against the AI, you can let players feel powerful. You can let players win all the time. So everybody always wins and like they're having a good time with that. You can have all different progression systems and stuff like that. But as soon as you put in PvP, it just screws everything up. It's like how Destiny, I've heard lots of people saying that, Crucible and Gambit kind of ruined Destiny in a way because there's so much stuff that would be fun, but they can't do because of Crucible, because of the PvP elements. That make it unfair and stuff like that. And it's like, if they liberated it from the PvP side, it would probably be more fun. And I think lots of people feel like that about DMZ. That DMZ, for a lot of people, would be more fun if there weren't players there. If they could just go into our Mouser and fight bots and complete missions and stuff like that and search around for loot, they'd have a great time. And, what's wrong with that? Like, what's the problem with them having a great time doing that? So I think BIOS might be onto something there. I think multiplayer in terms of PvP stuff might slowly sort of like take a bit of a back seat. It's been very, very popular for a while now. I wouldn't be surprised if, like Pal is saying there, like AI getting better, AI making the environments more interesting, making enemies more interesting, making like gameplay systems more interesting. I think like that could be a big thing that like pushes games forwards in the future. I'm definitely always a bit more excited with those kind of games, like Diablo 4 is coming out very soon. What, we've just got a month and a bit now to wait for that, and that is, I know it has a PvP element to it, but it's almost entirely PvE, and I think I'm going to be super excited about it, and I'm going to be super engaged with it. It's going to have loads of replayability. It's going to be awesome, and I don't need to fight other people with it. I can play with other people, but not necessarily against them. So I think that's maybe what's going to happen. Pal said, as a prototype uses 25 chat GPT agents in a virtual town. There's an article about it on TechCrunch. Oh, I might go read that now. So, thank you very much, everyone who's been watching today or listening. If you're listening on your podcast services of choice, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching it on YouTube, and consider becoming a member. It does support me. It helps me to keep on doing these things in future. And I will be back tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. BST. I'll also be around later today. So it's Wednesday today on Twitch. Whenever Plunder releases for Call of Duty, I'll be live playing some Plunder with Flynn, maybe Fireborn, maybe Scotto. And we'll be checking all of that out. So make sure you give me a follow on twitch.tv/geeky pastimes. Thank you so much to everyone that's been watching, and goodbye.